And because we're tight on time, I won't say anything critical in the next 2 minutes, but I'll kind of get us warmed up. I've had several county residents come to some various town halls, to my traveling office hours, and I have just been really thankful to hear directly from county residents who are concerned with annexation, and to hear what it is that the concerns are and be able to address some of them, and others, you know, if I can't, I just started early, you're welcome, come on in. If I can't provide a solution on the spot, to know that this is what people are wondering about and concerned about. And so I wanted to have a public forum to really invite especially county residents to come talk to me so that I can listen to you and to ask questions, and also really just to give you some high-level overview of where I am in my thinking about annexation. And I won't be talking tonight about specifics of, thank you so much, of what's in the courts, but I do want to talk to you about where I am with annexation and why we are pursuing the appeal. But importantly, I am here to listen to what the concerns are and what questions you have for me as we move forward. And because it's now 5:30, I feel like I can launch right in. So let me start by just saying thank you. I know that if you're here, it means that you are taking time out of the rest of your life to invest in government process, and that this discussion has not been an easy one, really, I don't think, for anybody. And I want to be a leader that can always talk about the hard things and listen to the hard truths, and also work towards a place where we can at least understand each other, even if we don't agree on outcomes. So that's why I'm here tonight. Tonight's listening session is really an opportunity to have an open and honest conversation, and I hope we can do that with mutual respect. I know that each of you in this room are bringing perspectives to the table that I may not have heard before, and I'm going to listen with very open ears to what your concerns and questions are. And so I want to just start with a brief context and history of annexation for those of you. Many in the room may be versed on this well, but I've learned a lot about the history of annexation in our city as I have come into office and really been looking at this more closely. Before he left office in 2003, John Fernandez had worked in partnership with the county commissioners to create a plan that addressed a future incremental annexation of properties into the city. This was all agreed to. It was a plan that they worked on together, and all of those properties were in what we used to call the 2-mile fringe. And come on in, I just needed to start on time because we have to end on time, and I wanted to give as much opportunity for this conversation as possible. So all these properties were in what we used to call the 2-mile fringe. Of course, the 2-mile fringe doesn't exist anymore. And with that agreement and that plan, the city expanded the water service and wastewater service to the areas that were intended to be annexed within that plan, even before they were annexed. And so we have now today many areas in the county that are not within the city that could easily access water and wastewater CBU services. And they did that through signing a waiver that they wouldn't oppose annexation in the future when it was time to annex their property into the city. So during the Fernandez administration, annexation was on routine. There were just small annexations happening. And then after that, for 13 years, no further annexation occurred. So that plan was not followed through on. There was a pause put on any future annexation. That was, my understanding is, a decision by the city administration at that time. And then city administration changed again, and in 2017, under John Hamilton, the city of Bloomington proposed annexing nearly 10,000 acres in 7 different areas to expand city services and the city's boundaries. And so there are many goals that I understand were hoped to accomplish through this annexation process. I will say, as I have said many times before, I don't necessarily agree with the process that happened with annexation in the last administration. I understand better how and why that happened, but I want to tell you, as the mayor of Bloomington now, I am committed to not moving forward with projects until I listen and understand and really try to include people in the process. And from what I've heard from some residents that are in areas that were intended for annexation, now areas that are in the annexation that's being disputed, are that there really was a feeling that the city was coming in and telling them that they had to become part of the city and they weren't going to get anything for it. And that there was no need to listen to people because the city had the right to do this. I always believe that there is a need to listen to people, and to the best of my ability to meet the needs of residents that I either do serve or will serve. And of course, we're in a place now where the courts have this annexation, but it's important to me still to understand, because what is happening now is that we're in a place where the courts are just going to decide. And if the courts end up deciding that the city is going to expand its boundaries, I want you all to know that my door is open to you. And it's open to you now if you would like to talk outside of this meeting. And so let me continue for a few minutes with where we have gotten with the annexation. The process got interrupted after it was originally filed in 2017 when the state legislature intervened, passing legislation to block the annexation efforts. The city challenged that intervention in court, and the Supreme Court ruled in the city's favor in 2020. And then the residents were permitted to file remonstrance. So this has been a very long and I'm sure for people who've been in this a long time, an arduous process. And most recently, the Monroe County courts ruled some waivers that were invalid, affecting the annexation process even further. When I came into office and started studying annexation and talking to the annexation experts and tried to weigh what I was going to do, there were a couple of factors that were particularly important to me. And the most critical of those factors that I heard was that the data is very clear that a city that doesn't have any elasticity in its boundaries begins to go to population decline and economic decline. But that's true not just for the city, but for the county around it. And frequently, if the city is an economic center for a region, the entire region can go into decline. And that's concerning to me for a number of reasons. It's concerning to me for the future of our communities, both the county, the city, and even the entire labor shed, which is quite broad. And I should have brought a map of the labor shed. It is important because of our schools, and it's important because of the prosperity of our families. We are increasingly seeing a distribution of wealth, especially, and I haven't looked at the county numbers and don't know how they particularly fall, but in the city limits now, we are really seeing a disappearance of the middle class, which is what we're seeing really in many areas of the country. And this is very concerning to me as somebody who's been in community development for a long time, and as someone who is now elected to lead our city. It takes all kinds of people to make a community work. And when we get to a point where our city cannot grow economically, and in fact has a declining population, then we are really in a tough situation, all of us. It is, you may have watched the November 19th school board meeting where their demographer now has really made his opinion clear that the school population now has declined to such an extent that they're considering closing schools. Now, lots of people are here because their kids can continue to have a bright future here. And I don't think we want to be a community that says we only want to be home to people who no longer have school-aged kids or who never want school-aged kids. That's not a healthy community. And so I already was concerned about our ability to grow. I now am further concerned that we're not only not keeping pace with the population in Indiana, but we're actually far behind many areas of Indiana. And I think it's no coincidence that we haven't annexed anything in 20 years. And we are, in fact, seeing the results that the annexation experts have said that we will see. So that's why this matters to me. There are a lot of things that I have been hearing from county residents about, that some of which are true and some of which are not true. But I want to open the doors to some questions, and we have various maps on slides. If you can just pop one slide open, so this QR code, if you are a person who uses a smartphone and you want to submit questions in real time, you can pop this QR code, just focus your camera on this, and you can submit a question. Desiree also has note cards, or Taylor has note cards, so we will get those to you if you raise your hand. But if we can start feeding questions in while I finish up talking, that would be great, because then I can try to answer as many questions as I can. So
It's not going to work. I'm sorry, you failed to recognize that most people in this room don't operate that way by QR code and input. So
I understand.
Okay.
Thank you, Margaret. And that's why we have note cards for anybody who wants to write a question on note cards. So just raise your hand, and we'll have a note card brought to you, and you can ask your questions that way. Where was I? Let me talk a little bit about the timeline of where we are right now, and then I'm going to just use all of the rest of the time to answer questions. So on December 17th, an oral argument will be made in the appeal case. The decision will not be decided immediately. We're very clear on that. So we don't intend to hear a decision on December 17th. We are, as I said, appealing the trial, and the process could take up to 2 years from start to finish. We are keeping a close eye on legislative issues that could affect annexation. Again, you know, I have really become committed to following through on annexation because of the impacts that it has on our families, on our residents, and on the prosperity, really, of our entire region. So we will take any note cards that are ready if you just pop them in, and I have a couple already in Q&A. How have your opinions shifted from the time I ran for mayor and until today? It seems like you've made changes in your opinions on the issue. Yes, I have in fact made some changes in the weight of my opinion on the issue. While I was open to annexation before and felt like we could have handled the process in a different way, I now more fully understand, after reading literally hundreds of pages of studies on annexation and sitting through many days of the trial, the real impacts that it has on all of our communities. And while I understand that it is a difficult thing and a difficult process, I did run to represent this community in what I think is in the best interest of our community. And it is my opinion that we do need to have some elasticity in our boundaries in order to promote the economic health that we need, and indeed the housing that many people are really searching for. The next question is, why don't you just start over and do it right from the start? So I assume that right means by having listening sessions and forming an annexation plan that we could implement from the start. With collaboration, the challenge is that frankly, having something in the courts already means that it would be a very long time before we could start an annexation process again. As we can see from our population decline and really the unaffordability of living in our communities, we really are way behind on getting to a point where the already urbanized areas are incorporated into the city, and where we have some elasticity in our boundaries. So the next question is, in my eyes, the courts have already spoken. Why are you appealing and wasting more money? The sort of lowest level court has already spoken. We are choosing to appeal because there are a couple of things that are particularly concerning. And because I'm not going to discuss the details of the case, but because there are really good merits that we think deserve appeal. Frankly, starting over would cost a whole lot more money, because if you start the annexation process over again, the bulk of the money has been spent in the plans and the financial studies, so that investment has already been made. The next question, I am so sorry, I failed to introduce Margie Rice, our corporation counsel. It's what happens when I get started before start time. Margie is our corporation counsel. She will answer any legal questions other than the one I just answered. How do population trends relate to our housing needs? So I'm going to answer this in two ways. The first is I'm going to answer the question that's not being asked, which is, if our population is going down, why do we need more housing? And that is a super logical question to ask. And what's happening right now is that housing is sort of locked in. And so, for instance, I live in a house where I have been raising up to 5 children. I still live in the same house, but only 3 children live there now. But I don't plan to move for a couple of reasons. Interest rates are really high, and there's not a lot of supply of housing for me to move to. And so my house, probably for the foreseeable future, will continue to house fewer and fewer people. The challenge is nobody can move into Bloomington if they can't afford a property, and the more scarce they are, the less affordable they are. And so we won't get the population increase unless we have some housing supply to put them in. Okay, so this one comes with, sorry, this is a long one. Forced annexation, while legal under Indiana state law, is unnecessary, unjust, and downright immoral. It's illegal in 47 states for very sound reasons. Majorities of the property owners in the areas to be annexed have expressed their opposition to being brought into the jurisdiction of a city government they didn't elect and to being subjected to new taxation in which they had no say and won't until at least 2031. In exchange for promised services they haven't asked for, and which many believe, based on documented prior experience, will never materialize anyway. When you were running for mayor, you never actually said whether you were for or against annexation per se, but you harshly criticized this annexation plan as poorly conceived, not transparent, another my way or the highway initiative by previous administration. I'm not going to read all of the details of this because I'm trying hard not to bash a former administration. Call it an exercise in cherry picking, et cetera, et cetera. I don't see a question here.
With all due respect, we'd like to speak in our own voices without them being read to us without our own voices.
And paraphrase.
We would like to speak in our own voices. It's only, you're here in the county to engage with us and to listen. And we would like you to listen to us, not filtered through some prepared system that didn't include us in the process, in the design process.
Great. So why don't we go one at a time instead of blurting out? And if you would like to raise your hand, then I will call on you. And if we can be aware that there are many people in the room and keep our comments as brief as possible, that would be great.
Well, my name is Margaret Clements, and I'm the leader of County Residents Against Annexation. I'm the president of County Residents Against Annexation. It's a 501c3 public not-for-profit charity that exists to represent people in the annexation areas so that in situations like this, that you are not placed in further risk. You'll notice that Mayor Thompson is sitting there with her attorney, and we would have to pay our attorney in order to be here as well. In addition, there are no county executives at the table with Mayor Thompson. This is inherently unfair, and it's been unfair from the beginning. The involuntary annexation to start and the remonstration process that took place throughout a holiday season like this.
Point of information, Councilor Crossley is in the audience.
She is not our county executive. Our 3 county executives are Penny Githens, Julie Thomas, and Lee Jones.
I'm going to jump in here. I invited all of the county elected officials to this meeting. I would really like to hear
From residents, not a formulated case being made about everything that we could have done better right now. I am happy to have another,
Yes.
excuse me, I'm still talking.
I hear you, but I was talking, so I would like to have a show of hands
I'm happy to have
here.
another listening
Who-
session,
I
Margaret,
would
that
like
does
to
include
have
them.
a show of hands who would allow me or would request that I speak on your behalf.
Margaret, what is your question?
Okay? If you would stop and listen for this listening session, I have prepared a statement.
Okay.
Okay? Formal public engagement and listening sessions regarding involuntary annexation of Monroe County property owners ended with Bloomington City Council's September 15th, 2021 and September 21st, 2021 approvals of ordinances greenlighting 7 simultaneous annexation attempts. After the ordinance were passed, Monroe County property owners successfully remonstrated, and the Monroe County Auditor closed the remonstration process on January 6, 2022. It was certified by the Auditor on February 23, 2022. In keeping with our mission to educate, inform, involve, and represent, it's incumbent upon us to remind the Mayor of the facts. As part of the legal process, remonstrators with signatures from more than 51% but less than 65% of property owners were entitled to judicial review. Those residents secured legal representation and won in court. However, because the city of Bloomington chose to appeal, the annexation issue remains in the hands of the legal system. The city has also chosen to appeal the constitutional case concerning the legality of the 2019 law that invalidated waivers of rights to remonstrate, which were older than 15 years. After carefully evaluating the arguments, Judge Nykirk ruled against the city on most of its claims concerning the unilateral and involuntary annexation of areas 1C, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The city's appeal of that decision will be heard by the Indiana Court of Appeals on December 17th in Indianapolis. It is not lost on us that you brought your lawyer, paid for by the taxpayer, that you have set up recording devices here in this room, and that we cannot do the same. It feels like a trap. It feels like entrapment. We're not really free to speak. We are muted by the legal system and the legal process that you have chosen to employ against us using the people's money. And we find this to be unfair, that this is yet again another holiday season, the 4th now in a row, that you have taken our attention away from our families. And here we are contending yet again with this ugly, unilateral process that you have invoked and you have chosen to continue. We would like you to let us be. Can you let us be?
I want to answer that question because I think it's, you're bringing up a, we respect everybody's right to due process and to follow the law. And we are using the legal process to appeal this. If you had lost, you certainly would have had the right to appeal. So we respect your legal right, and we expect you to also respect our legal rights. So we are following a legal process that the General Assembly set forth. And so I think the short answer to your question is legally, no, we will not stop. We will continue the process because it's a fair legal process. And you have employed an attorney, could have been here tonight. I also am being paid. I just don't get paid $200 an hour like your attorney does. So he is being paid, I get paid, and so I'm just saying, you had every right to bring your attorney if you wanted to bring your attorney.
So I'm
Is my mic on? Yeah. I'm going to just encourage us all to try to be as respectful as possible. And I just want to reflect some things that I heard that Ms. Clemens said, that this feels like a trap, and it feels really unfair that this has been 4 holiday seasons in a row that you all have been, or some of you all have been showing up. I certainly never want to trap anybody into anything. I appreciate your amendments to the way I initially thought we could run this meeting. I see that we have a lot of people who may want to talk, and I was really just trying to get a process that could listen to as many people. And my commitment is that if we want to have a listening session in the future that has county electeds as well as city electeds, we certainly can. And I was actually in the middle of this other question or statement here. And there are a couple of things here that I just want to offer are not done deals. In particular, that people will have no say until at least 2031. One of the things, it is my understanding after the court's rule, that yes, if it were ruled in favor of the city that annexation were going to happen, we could take up to 2031 in order to have newly annexed areas vote. I think that's one of the things that we can discuss. And I think that's all fair game. And I know we're not in a position to negotiate and discuss necessarily right now, but I really believe that there are many of these things that are of concern to people that really we could probably reach a better agreement to. So can you help pass the mic?
Are the new apartment complexes, and many of them that are very large, are those considered part of the housing?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Are they part of what?
Part of the housing?
So I think the comment is, are the large apartment complex part of housing?
Yes. Is that considered part of housing? Because you're talking about housing, and like where you live, and you're going to stay when you're out. What about, are the apartment buildings that just were built within the last 3 or 4 years, and they're big, and they have many people there. I'm not sure if they're occupied or what.
Yeah.
Are those considered part of the housing?
Yes. So apartments are considered part of housing. Yes, and we have a very high occupancy rate, and my goal in housing is to really direct any housing incentives to people who are going to live and work in Bloomington.
So there's that much work in Bloomington?
Yeah, we actually have had a number of companies have to move out of town because they cannot recruit the workforce because they can't find housing. Yes.
Thank you. I got it. Okay. Hi, I'm Sandy Sabah. I've been a resident of Bloomington for 40-some years. Most of that time as a professional real estate broker. I understand housing. I understand supply. I understand demand. I'm not an economist, but on a gut level, I do understand. I worked it every day for 40-some years. What concerns me most, sorry, I developed a tremor over the last year.
It's okay, Sam.
What concerns me most is the idea of 47 states in the country saying, you shall not annex us against our will. What's wrong with Indiana? Why is it that it's okay in Indiana and not okay in 47 other states? We need to think about that. You know, I'm from Ohio, and I hate to say it, but Indiana falls way down on the list relative to Ohio in education, in the number of people that leave our state, in the number of jobs. We're not really doing all that well. So why are we taking what the mayor said is the best interests of the community? I don't think so. I do not feel that way that it is. And regarding more sessions, I think more sessions are going to be needed and useful. But my art teacher in grade school said something to me that I've never forgotten. She said, looking at something is not the same as seeing it. You know, here, draw this vase with a flower in it. Well, that doesn't look like a flower. That doesn't look like a vase. Oh, you're not seeing what you're looking at. And my concern with the listening sessions is listening is not the same as hearing. You may listen to someone, but unless you on a gut level are willing to hear it, you hear the 47%, you hear the 65% of the people in the potentially annexed areas do not want it. That's just not the 47% states. That's 65% of the people in the potentially annexed areas don't want it. They've signed the remonstration paperwork. So what's going on here? Are we listening? Are we seeing? I'd like to say that it should be more intense if that's what you're trying to do. Thank you.
I didn't hear a question, and if I missed it, I'm happy to answer it. I did hear that, or I did listen to seeing something is not the same as really being able to understand it, and that just because someone listens doesn't mean they hear. And so I am going to do my very best to genuinely hear you as best I can. And of course, I've never been exactly in your seat. I do want to say there's a couple of times there's been mention of voluntary versus involuntary annexation. This is an involuntary annexation, and the city services had been extended to many of these areas with the understanding that they would be annexed. And usually voluntary annexation happens because a resident or somebody who's going to develop property wants to urbanize by connecting to water and sewer. And so that's how the voluntary annexations typically happen, and those city services are provided.
Okay, I guess my question would be, how can you hear 65% and not listen to 65% and react? That's a number that's accurate. It was authenticated, and all I hear in response is, well, never mind, 65%, we don't care about that. We have big brother interests that are broader than that, and are in the best interest of the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I understand the numbers in the remonstrance. I also will say that it's a tough position to be in, because if some of these areas are not annexed, because we've already extended services, what it does is build an entire wall around the city, and it prohibits any growth, and that will be problematic for our economy and for the well-being of our residents.
But you're getting
So,
paid for those services, the tax.
so the question is, are we getting paid for the services? County residents who are on CBU services do pay for CBU services. However, the cost to maintain those CBU services and the infrastructure infrastructure that is needing to be maintained beneath roads that we do not maintain is costly for the city, and providing it in pockets that are outside of the city is onerous, and so it would not have been.
Wouldn't you call that bad business?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Put all those systems in the areas that aren't in the annexation yet, wouldn't you call that bad business? Because you did it ahead of time?
We did it per the interlocal agreement.
We did
So
it
yeah.
with legal agreements in place and agreements from the property owners, so.
Business and bad business is two different things, you know what I mean?
Well,
They
the-
gotta go hand in hand.
Well, I will agree with you. We won't be doing that anymore.
This term.
Let's be respectful. Not really.
Be respectful of us.
I'll try to step somewhere so that I can see the people here. Thank you for coming, but also speak to Mayor. Thank you for being here. My name is Thomas McGuy, and this is the third time that the place where I've lived has been subject to annexation. In 2021, I remember August 4th, it was the first day of school in the public school systems. The city held a public hearing, something like this, to hear what we had to say. At the last moment, there was a surprise venue change, and I won't go into the details there, that people had shown up at the Showers building, and suddenly they had to rush home and try to figure out how to use Zoom. But 90 people managed to make that transition and speak, and of those, and I think it went on like 7 hours, 87 of the people who spoke, by my counting, spoke against annexation, and 3 of them spoke in favor. So we might think, how would we take those numbers, 87 to 3? Mayor Hamilton stated in the paper, his takeaway was that this was overwhelming support for annexation because only 87 people out of 14,000 were opposed. That was a mockery and an insult to our community for him to have said that. Now, that was before you came into office. Back then, as has been mentioned already, you had some very choice words for how Hamilton's administration handled this, but you've now been in office for a year. What have you heard in this time? Some of the things I think you would have heard: a 5-day bench trial pitting the city against our supermajority of residents that went into overtime listening to the testimony of us saying this is not in our best interest. Taking away trash and recycling options isn't in our best interest. Putting us under the yoke of hundreds of city regulations and ordinances isn't in our best interest. Switching us to a police force that's already stretched thin isn't in our best interest. Taking away from our taxes away from our fire district, library system, and waste management districts isn't in our best interest. And raising our property taxes upwards of 40% isn't in our best interest. And I do remind all the residents here that this battle that the city is waging is a grassroots effort that is funded by donations. Mayor Thomas hasn't relented. The city continues to battle us in the very expensive appeals courts, so please consider donating to the organization here that's trying to fight. If we don't donate now, we'll be paying city taxes for the rest of our lives. The question, what have you heard in the year that you've been here from the residents that makes you think we should keep going when all this evidence is us saying, no, thank you?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 parts to the question. One is, what is the evidence, and what have I heard? I have met, as I said, with several county residents who had impressions about what they were going to be required to do once annexation happened, if it happens. And some were concerned that they would have to pay immediately to put sidewalks in front of their homes, which is not the case. Some were concerned that they would have to pay to put streetlights in, also not the case. So I've been talking through certain issues like that. Others have mentioned things like you just mentioned, no ability to choose a trash service. You actually can choose a trash service. You have the opportunity to have your trash picked up by the city of Bloomington, but you also are free to get your own trash service. So these are some of the things that I've been hearing. The evidence that I have not only heard but read includes, of course, that people are concerned about property taxes and what their tax rate is going to be, and people are concerned about how long it will be before they're able to vote to elect their city leadership. And the other concern that I have heard is I don't want to be part of Bloomington. Just outright, I just don't want to be part of Bloomington.
Is there a document that supports everything you're saying right now? Is there a document that supports everything you're saying, with not having curbs, not having sidewalks, not having streetlights?
What I said is that you won't be required to pay for streetlights or sidewalks. So,
Excuse me, he's asking, is that on paper, documented? I mean, I think what it is, it's a lack of trust.
yeah, it sounds like it.
It's a big lack of trust, because first,
Can she finish just a second?
You're saying that, but if it's not on paper, it is not legally binding and true.
So
and first it was 65%,
So-
we got to 65%, now we gotta come back here and do this again? I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean,
Ladies and gentlemen,
Yeah,
please go in the
so-
that you raise your hands.
yeah, okay, so
Yeah, hold on just a second, please, because she's trying to answer one of the questions that's been asked.
it's just like a constant lie.
Yeah, well, you're not required to come, but I'm grateful that you came, and I am doing my best to get your questions answered.
so
This is what this is for.
It's his property. We're talking
can,
It's my property, I'm in here for everybody, and everybody else is in here for everybody.
can I address the question? I think that what the mayor was pointing out is there was a lot of misinformation that was provided when this annexation plan was rolled out. She's hearing from people who are saying, I heard I was going to have to put my sidewalk in place.
Document that supports everything that you just.
So the statute, let me just tell you, the statute says what a city has to do when they annex territory. And the city would be responsible for putting in the infrastructure that is necessary in those areas, not the individual homeowners. So all that, the answer is all that is in part in that fiscal plan that we developed where we said, hey, this is how much it would cost us. So Mayor Thompson was pointing out that the city will put in that infrastructure. The homeowner is not going to have to pay for that cost.
If the infrastructure is going in, then the
put that
city
in
will.
writing?
It's in the statute and in the fiscal plan.
I was under the understanding that if you sold your property, and if you don't have a sidewalk there, when you sell it, you have to put one in before you.
So you're talking about planning requirements. That's probably what you're talking about, yeah.
So we're getting into a little bit of a back and forth, and there are other people that do have questions. It's not true that a property transfer triggers a planning process, which is what the sidewalk is. If you want to rezone that property, it could require a sidewalk in the future. That would be what would usually trigger that. We have a question here. Can we get the mic, because otherwise we won't be able to hear on cats.
Ma'am, did you get your question?
Oh, yeah, no, yes, I'm finished.
My name's Rhonda Gray, and I live in 1B. If annexed, and you said we would be able to choose our trash provider, would there be a penalty to me or the trash provider?
If you chose someone else, other than the city, is that what you mean?
No, there's no penalty for choosing a different trash provider.
Okay, so I wouldn't have a penalty, or the trash provider would not if they decide, like if I wanted Ava's to come.
No, you're at liberty to choose that.
There's an ordinance
Okay, thank you.
I I saw him next, and then I'll come here. Okay.
With all due respect, Scott Ferris, I was Area 6, and Area 6, which
Area
is no
6,
longer on your
okay.
map up here. And our neighborhoods were pretty, and I'll use that magical word called adamant about not being. Could you hear what I said?
No.
Okay, Area 6, our neighborhoods were pretty adamant about not being annexed, but I think we had over 90%. I went to the city council meeting, and I did make a presentation, and it was an adversarial discussion. And actually, quite frankly, it was on both sides. It was not a very collegial, as you would hope, type discussion. And I would certainly encourage everybody here to be collegial as possible, because we're not going to solve any problems if we just start jabbing each other. Okay. I used to write proposals for a living. Okay. I pulled apart the proposal the city put together and was presented. And I pulled apart the costing document. And I looked in the execution year and the out years, broken down by functional area, that talked about the funding that was going to be provided for those areas. Goose eggs. When we went to the Public Works discussion and asked the questions of the reps in front of those various functional areas about what in fact would be provided, and I'll just use Area 6 as an example, and this is kind of tracks with some of the questions you heard back here. We were told that if we wanted to take and improve our water, which is substandard, we would have to pay for it. We were told that if we wanted to take and put in sewers, we had to pay for it. We were also told that if we wanted to put in streetlights, which we don't, light pollution, that we would have to pay for it. That's why you're hearing this discussion here about if this is not the case, or if we've had a sea change here, then somebody needs to come out and be a little more, provide more information on it.
So this is, so I'm hearing the difference in a little bit of what we're talking about. So the thing that I was initially talking about is the city's not going to come out and say, you have to have a street light here and you have to pay for it. Now, if a community comes together and says, we want streetlights in our neighborhood, that's true for current city residents too. Likewise, anybody, city, I mean, now we're not doing CBU connections outside of the city, but anybody who wants to connect to sewer or water does need to pay the connection fee.
But that's just from the house to the street, correct?
If there's a main in the street,
And if there's not a main, who pays for the main?
Well, usually the developer pays for the main.
Right.
So,
And so that's the point.
yes.
Okay, so not to cut you off, but, so then we get into the discussion about what services the city is actually going to provide to us in the county. And I'll talk about Area 6 again. And essentially, what we saw were zero services. We got zero services.
Okay.
We got the bit about the garbage, and you could take and get your own, or you go with the city, et cetera. And me, as an example, my property taxes went up 33%.
They already went up 33?
They would have gone up
Oh, I see.
33%. And that was pretty common through our area out there. And that's why so many people were upset with annexation. They saw us providing more revenue for the city with no benefit or services provided to our area. Quite frankly, in our area, we have great county services. Now, changing the subject a little bit, and this is old Bloomington discussions, okay? We have lost the core of our city. The core of the city used to be where people lived. I'm talking about Bloomingtonians living. Now the core of the city is housed by students and people who have bought those properties up, and they made them into, putting 4 or 5 people on it, if not more. It's eaten up the parking on the streets. You have permits everywhere. There's no street parking. In the city of Bloomington, you have to pay to park, even at Indiana University, I might add. You got to pay to park everywhere. Okay, this is not conducive to people who want to come and live in our city. The other thing that I want to point out is that
The Bloomingtonians have moved out because of that very reason. The students have taken over. They've taken over the downtown area. It used to be that you could walk around the square and you could go to buy anything you needed around the square. That's not the case anymore. And I can talk because of my father's business, okay? And what you're seeing today in the downtown area, and I'm talking about the weekends when the parents come to town, which is about every weekend, because he got all the parents' weekends, if not the sporting events. The downtown area needs to be cleaned up. I mean, the streets, the sidewalks, they need to be cleaned up. You've got vomit, you've got all sorts of stuff. In some cases, some of the alleyways, just walk down by the Indiana Theater, the Oddfellows alleyway there, and it smells like a public urinal. And it has now for a long time. So if in fact you want to attract people to come down to your downtown area, whether they want to live there or they want to visit, the optics of Kirkwood and the downtown area where people would do a walkabout, it's very important. It needs to be cleaned up. I got off track there a little bit, but I felt I needed to say that.
Yeah, thank you. We are working really hard to get things cleaned up, and hopefully you're starting to notice a little bit of a difference, and we'll continue to keep on. You've got a hand back in the back, Taylor. Oh yeah, we have 5 minutes left, so if we can be concise with our questions, that'd be great.
I'll keep this short. Thank you, Mayor. Bloomington's not been job-friendly for several decades through certain administrations. They have forced out a lot of companies. We need industry. We can have clean industry in our city. We can prove that by Cook and Pharmaca and several others. But they're not job-friendly here. If you have a service job, like restaurants, which fail because they're short-lived, that's what they cater to, is, as Mr. Ferris was saying, mostly students. We are residents. I'm the 5th generation. Mr. Ferris is even longer than that in this county. I have a question, but if I ask it, I won't get my other statements out. Where we live is in 2. We're in the southeast corner. And if you lived and drove down that road, it is not city material. It's high ravines. It's very rugged. It's county. It's country. It is not city material. This has been in my family since my great-grandfather moved here after the Civil War. And there's been many generations lived on that, and hopefully I'll continue that legacy with my grandchildren living on it too. With city sewer, I've been told that if we get that, you will have to join it. You cannot leave your existing septic system. You have to hook on. Well, in my case, I live near 1,000 feet off the road. That's going to cost thousands of dollars. We just keep getting milked for everything. Higher taxes, everything's going up. Everything's going up. And it's forcing a lot of people out. You're wondering why there are a lot of people moving out? We can't afford to live here anymore. The place that we grew up and loved and lived in all of our lives. And think about the lives of people here that are representing. I think we're in a unanimous group that I've lost my track, I'm sorry. I had an injury not too long back, and but I know there's a lot more to say. But my question is, how long have you lived in Bloomington, Ms. Mayor?
I've lived here since 1997, it sounds like there are a couple of sewer infrastructure concerns that I hadn't heard about before, and these are exactly the kinds of things I was hoping to get out of this meeting. And it may be necessary, should annexation happen, for us to look at how we can provide some CDBG money or otherwise help support that initial infrastructure expense. My understanding is that you can keep your septic, you just can't replace your septic. And so once it completely fails, and if there's sewer access where you are, once your septic completely fails, you do need to hook on. And it does sound like, and I'm grateful to the, we've had several city council members here, but it does sound like we need to consider some assistance for these longer sewer lines, laterals that may be needed, and possibly the infrastructure of a sewer main. So thank you for bringing up those concerns. I hadn't heard about them before. Yep.
My name's Harry Ferris. I live in a property that has been on city sewer and water for 60-plus years. In 2019, the city, in my view, retaliated against us, and since then have charged us an 11% surcharge on our water and sewage. So as a good faith gesture, would the city reconsider that and refund all those funds that all the citizens on city water and sewer that are non-residents have been paying?
So are you saying there was a rate increase in 2019?
Surcharge on all non-residents.
I'd have to look into what was the basis for that surcharge to know if it was, so we're regulated by
It was
the,
pushed through by Mayor Hamilton because we would not accept annexation willingly.
I'm not familiar with that surcharge, but I would, because I wasn't at the city in 2019, but I would need to look and see what was the basis for that surcharge. But it sounds as if it was related to cost.
Non-residents.
But
Anybody that's out of the city
it,
has city sewer and water.
We're happy to check into
Yeah.
why it's there. And if you give us your contact information, we can get back with you. All right, so we do have a hard stop at 6:30, and I want to thank you all again for spending your time tonight at the meeting, and for offering some things that we can check into to hopefully, should annexation go through, make it more palatable. And I just want to close by saying I continue to want to listen and understand where you're coming from, and that doesn't always mean that either one of us are going to get the outcome that we want, but your experiences do shape the way that I lead, and I really appreciate for you spending some of your holiday time with us tonight. Thanks.